tonight on The Line, Does Religion Cause Harm? With your host, Jimmy Snow, and featured guest, Shannon Q. Welcome to The Line.
Yeah! Sorry for a little bit of delay getting started there. There were some literal, up to the moment technical issues prior to going live, so that's hence the few issues there. Welcome to another episode of The Line. I am joined by somebody have been waiting to do this with, excited to do this with. Also, I feel that I should explain that a cursive letter Q looks very similar to the number 2. So to my left here is, in fact, not Shannon 2, but Shannon Q.
Hi everybody. I'm really excited. I've been anticipating this for weeks. I can't wait. I love taking live calls. I'm so excited to see who's going to call in and what they have to say. This is wonderful. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm way excited too. And I want people to be very familiar with the Shannon Q face, because there will certainly be weeks where she is present and I am not. In fact, she will be hosting on March 3rd a show with her and Paula Gia. Should be a very spicy show, I think.
We'll try to keep our sexual tension down to maybe a 3. That's the best I can give you. That is the best I can give you, and it's going to take everything I have to do that. So that's
It'll be a good show. It'll be a good show. I feel like there are going to be people who call in to try and kind of push it a little bit more too. Make sure that if you are watching over on my channel, that being Mr. Atheist, that you follow the link in the description, or the one that the mods, I'm sure, are semi-frequently posting, and go actually watch this over on The Line's channel. That it is a new show and a new channel that we're trying to build up. We want this to be successful, and right now in the works are already some midweek shows with some guest hosts that I think you're going to be very excited about. After The Line is done today, I'll actually be speaking with one such person, and it will be their first time ever appearing on my channel, or I think any atheist related channel at all. And I don't want to give too much away, but the topic will be related to the cult that has sort of been forming around a certain internet personality that has become very a lot of you know. Anyway, okay, so that's just a little teaser. Again, don't want to give too much away, just enough to bug you. So make sure that while you're over there, you hit subscribe so you never miss one of the new episodes. We're going to jump in pretty quick. Shannon, any thoughts or things you want to share before we get going?
No, I'm just really excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to everything that this show brings. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to have dialogue. Everybody who is familiar with me knows that I'm heavy on promoting promising discourse and more productive discourse. So this is a great opportunity, and I'm really appreciative that you decided to allow me to be a part of it. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited you are here. Oh, and I guess last thing before we get into this first call, next Sunday we will have the incomparable Nate Brody joining, and we will be taking questions or challenges relating to whether or not the United States is in fact a Christian nation. And that, I think, is going to be just an excellent show. It'll be my first time working with Nate on my channel directly. We've become friends, but and so I'm excited to have Nate on for the first time too.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's taught constitutional law, so he should be somebody that's really interesting to have that conversation with.
Oh yeah. I think we both have some opinions on the matter.
For sure.
Very staunch opinions. All right, we are going to head to Maryland and talk to Rachel. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, how are you?
Oh,
I'm good. How are you?
Just delightful.
I'm
I'm just noticing. I was test driving it last week, and now we've got the whole new banner situation set up, and I'm starting to look at it, and I'm worried that this isn't the same one Fox News uses, right? It looks familiar for some reason, and I hate watch a lot of Fox News, and now I'm worried. But let's not worry about that. Let's worry about the topic of the day here. Rachel, what did you want to talk about?
I want to talk about how religion can be used in a negative way for self-medication.
Sure.
I grew up, I have mental illness, and as a kid, I was raised in a pretty religious, positive environment, no negativity, but as I got older, I started to pick up more of that negativity from the world around me and started to feel like all of my problems were because of religion or because I had done something bad to God and that I was being punished for doing something wrong. But over time, that viewpoint of kind of being angry shifted to this dependence on if I could be everything I could be for God, if I could do everything right, then I wouldn't have to worry about it. And I started to take the routines of religion and the traditions of even just kneeling to pray. And I was Catholic, so there was a lot of like step-by-step things that you did, like you did the Father, Son, Holy Spirit before every prayer. And that became very peaceful and cathartic for me. But over time, I realized I was just using religion and using God as an excuse to not actually deal with my issues. And once I got out of that, I was really able to learn a lot more about myself, but also to be able to heal and realize that I'm not flawed because I did something wrong, that I'm not ill because I said something or did something to hurt God, that I have an illness that was genetically random and I happened to get it, and I did nothing to do with that. And the self-medication form of religion really was harmful for me growing up because it was blaming myself for all of the problems in the world around me.
Sure. Yeah, and I think a lot of us who have gone through, especially fundamentalist religion, remember the experience of not being able to ever be good enough or live up to whatever the ideal religious model was. And so whereas a lot of after religion sentiment is trying to learn to love yourself as you are, but still wanting to improve, you don't feel like there's this universal standard lording over you that not only are you not living up to, but when you don't live up to it, you are completely ashamed of yourself and find yourself to be disgusting, which is, I mean, that's the programming I grew up with. In Mormonism is anything that was remotely natural for me to feel as far as sexual thoughts or what they would have called impurity, those were the things that just the fact that I had those thoughts or those feelings, I was finding myself disgusted by. Shannon, did you want to?
I always have a million things to say.
Sure.
So I think, Rachel, I appreciate you sharing your story.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much for it. I think a lot of it has to do with the contextualization of our cognition. So when we're in a religious environment, we utilize that schematic scaffolding mentally in order to contextualize our interpretations of our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, our practices. So it's also a manner in which we attempt to satiate bad feelings. So we're essentially taught a routine that can satiate bad feelings and bad desires, and it can even actually cause us to feel an inordinate amount of guilt for things that, if we weren't otherwise contextualized within, that paradigm, wouldn't be apparent to us. It wouldn't be an issue. So I understand what you're saying there, where you were in a situation where essentially your meditative practice was for you to engage in some sort of prayer or self-reflection, but instead of actually addressing the problem, it was a temporary fix because it gave you like perhaps an oxytocin hit momentarily, right, that allowed you to feel as though you had temporarily, or at least in the immediate reality, solved the problem. when really the problem itself wasn't solved. It may have the religion may also have been the source of the problem, and the actual source of whatever problems weren't ultimately addressed because you didn't have the appropriate contextualization to realize what your neuroanatomy was actually dealing with. So I'm glad that you got to the other side of that and came to that realization. And I appreciate the strength that it takes to do something like that, because you get a lot of messages thrown at you essentially saying that this is the solution or this is the problem. And it's very, very difficult to overcome that. So I hope you're proud of yourself for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Excellent.
was a lot.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for calling in, Rachel. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And so I do just want to say, totally was very excited to hear Rachel's story. What I want to encourage for people who are calling in are people who, we have this excellent guest here who is something of an expert on this topic, if I can talk her up some here. And so we are looking for topics that are question-driven or challenge-driven. So if you have a question where you are curious about, is this a harmful behavior, and want some expounding on that, or if you want to actually defend the position that religion does not cause harm, those would be the sort of calls we are hoping to field today, because they, I think, will be most useful in addressing the topic. Again, thank you very much, Rachel, for calling. That's not meant to be like a, we just want to make sure if people are thinking this is a call-in to just share the stories, that wouldn't be this show. Those sorts of shows will happen, but that wouldn't be one like this. So
Jimmy wants me to fight with people.
I also very much would like, and so basically I shut down additional calls being able to be taken while I explain that. And so now that I've explained that, we will open up a couple more lines, but we still have the people who are here on hold, and we're definitely going to go through those. So we will next head to Bullhead, Arizona, which is a place I have never heard of. And we're going to talk to Zach. Zach, how are you doing?
Hi, Zach.
Good. How are you?
Just delightful. How is Bullhead, Arizona, and how was it named Bullhead? Do you know?
Important.
There's this urban myth, actually, that some scuba divers found a big giant rock in the Colorado River that looked like a bullhead. That's why they named it Bullhead City.
Interesting. Did they consider the idea that it was a skull? Like it was just, it's kind of a bull-shaped rock, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Zach, what did you want to chat about?
Actually, I wanted to talk about how religion is harmful and how it's harmed my life and how I look at things. Would that be okay?
Yeah. So as I was kind of mentioning before, we'll go ahead and take your story. We'll probably keep the call a little bit brief so that we can get into the questions from people who are currently going through something that they want some resolution to, as well as people who want to challenge the idea and perhaps stand up for the idea of religion not being harmful. But would definitely be happy to hear your story before we jump into those.
Right, and that's sort of why I need some clarification on some things too.
Good.
So I am 18, and I'm currently trapped in the Mormon religion. I don't know how to get out of it because my parents are really hardcore, and they tried pushing a mission on me, but I refused that. So they told me for the past 12 years that the only way they would ever help me with college is if I went to BYU. So being an innocent kid, I was like, oh, okay, cool, they'll pay for my college. Recently, I started discovering the really culty nature of BYU, and I don't want to be a part of that. So I was just wondering, how do I get my parents to accept me for who I am, or even if I don't go to BYU, how do I get them to appreciate me, accept me as their son, without them thinking, oh, we failed somebody like this, and it's having such a negative effect on my life, on their life, and I just feel like I'm a constant failure in their eyes, just because I don't have the same religious values as they do.
And I'm going to let Shannon field most of the question, but I do want to specify for people who don't know about the BYU culture. BYU is a school ran by the Mormon Church. It's an accredited university. You can get a full bachelor's and up to master's degree through there. I don't know if they do beyond master's. Off the top of my head, I think they do have a few post-grad programs. But the culture there, because it's a Mormon-run school, most of the people who attend, one of the preliminary requirements is that you have to have taken 4 years of seminary, which is something you do during high school, which is something that like you don't really not do if you're not an active member. So while there are some exceptions made, the majority of people there are people who are actively participating in the church. And then when you just reinforce the overall cult culture, which is a funny phrase, when you reinforce the overall cult culture, there is much more of that us versus them, black versus white. And I know that there are a lot of people, because they frequently contact me, who are currently attending BYU, who are just going through the motions and trying to basically get all the way to graduation without anybody finding out, because they can 100% pull your credits and your degree from you if you don't follow the rules, if you break honor code violations, whatever. There are people who have completed their degree in the past and were not issued their degree on the because they were queer. So these are things from the school's past, and the reinforcement culture there is very negative, and if you don't believe in the church, it's not a good place to be, especially if you actively believe the church is not true. As for the rest, I give to Shannon.
So I think one of the first and most important things that I want to say is make sure that you're safe, right? So when you're young and in your parents' care still, it's very, very important to make sure that you're safe. So that's imperative to me going in. When it comes to getting your parents to accept you, it's difficult to address that on a phone call, because everybody's individual relationships with their parents are incredibly dynamic, and the context is very, very important to understand how you should approach something like that. So some people are very, very staunch and they'll cut you off. And some people are a little bit more open because that relationship is something that's important. So I guess the question that I would ask you would be, what is that dynamic? First, how do you ensure your safety? And second, what are your ultimate goals when it comes to moving forward?
And Zach, if I can ask a favor here, if you can, so I've been kind of toggling the mute and on and off. If you can get to a more still location where there's maybe less wind coming in the microphone or whatever's causing that feedback, that would be helpful on our end.
Oh, my bad. Let me get somewhere real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries.
But anyway, getting to Shannon's question, my parents have this sort of manipulative status when it comes to raising their children. They'll make me think I'm doing something wrong, and it'll question my values. So they'll pretend I know they love me, but unless I follow a certain way that they live, it won't be accepted, and I'm in other ways shunned with the family. So it's been happening recently. So I've talked to them before, and they've told me they will shun me, or they'll still love me, but the relationship won't be the same if I leave the church.
Okay. So you need to make some very important decisions for yourself, importantly. I can't tell you what your ultimate choice should be. That's something that's going to be up to you. But my suggestion would be that if you are looking to emancipate, essentially, you should start building external relationships outside of the family that can help build a network of safety for you, and also accumulate money and skills so that you can support yourself. And until such a time that that's something that's feasible for you, keep your safety in mind. If you feel as though you're in a space where you're not being mentally, emotionally, or physically abused, and you are safe and you don't have to immediately remove yourself from that situation, I would start orchestrating some plans for an independent life. That would be the best advice, not knowing your full situation, that I could give you. And then once you have an independent life, your individual relationship with your parents can be worked on without you having to be concerned about your safety and, your ultimate day-to-day ability to live.
And from what I'm gathering from your story, Zach, and having come from the church myself, I'm going to guess that I know that the call started with how can I get my parents to accept me. The unfortunate reality is for you to live who you are as you are, there probably at the very least is going to be a period of time where they do try and hold to that shunning thing. And with some people it lasts forever, and for some people it only lasts a short period of time. And I think usually it's more often the short period of time. Something worth noting is the church doesn't have an official shunning policy. In fact, they had kind of created a mini one with queer parents where you had to disown your parents and you couldn't be living with them for you to be baptized if your parents were in a queer relationship. That is something that the church itself actually had to reverse, and they acknowledged because they were hurting so many people and so many families. I don't know if you have any members of the church, and this is one of those weird things where it's like, if you want to try and have a mediated conversation, I'd recommend you maybe bring somebody from outside the church and somebody from inside the church that doesn't support the concept of cultural shunning, as opposed to, again, they're not like the Jehovah's Witnesses. There isn't an official shunning policy. I still have a relationship. It's not healthier than my relationship was when I still lived with my parents, but that also wasn't a healthy relationship either. But I still have a relationship with my parents and some members of my family. And while I'm not saying cutting people out is something you should never do, because I don't feel that way, I have cut out individual members of my family because of the active harm they either had done to me in the past or were doing to me at the time. It may be worth, when that conversation is had, trying to bring in people that they respect and wouldn't support the concept of familial shunning. Again, that's actually not, if anything, that would be a policy against a lot of church policies, because they very much are interested in bringing people back in. There is some sort of cultural shunnings when it comes to that are reinforced by the church when it comes to your friends, but your family, it's actually the opposite. And so that might be worth consideration of having a broader conversation with mediation that has people, as I've mentioned a bunch of times, parents by default most often don't respect the opinions of their kids, especially religious parents when it comes to religious dissent. And it's sort of I'm the parent and I've been here longer and I know what's best for you, and that's enough for them because they already have so many faith patterns in their life. Adding one more is nothing. And so it probably is going to be conversations that again, knowing what the church is like and the way they reinforce the beliefs, that you're probably not going to be equipped in a way that they'll even take you seriously to begin with, and they're just going to gish gallop you with, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And your inability to answer all 500 of their questions in a paragraph or less will be enough for them to feel like they've justified dismissing you as well. So as far as a more personal to what my experience was, that would be the advice I would add on to what Shannon told you.
Okay, and I'm sorry for taking such a while, but if I could end with saying, if I could just end real quick saying, religion is not for everybody. It certainly wasn't for me. It wasn't healthy for my mental health. It wasn't healthy for my relationships. And I hope people can come to realize that before me, who found out too late and possibly affected their relationships. So please look out for that, guys.
Yeah, it's something that I wish there was a mindset of that within religion itself. Because while I obviously am doing a show trying to counter the harmful things that come out of religion, and that's largely what drives Shannon as well, it seems to me like we have this tolerant position of, as if you're not doing active harm, I'm not really going to come after you right now in you and your religion. And some of the people I am closest with are religious in some way. And so it would be kind of nice to have that reciprocated by some of the religions who go, you know what, this didn't work for them, so have a good life, and yet they are so often the ones demanding that we have a position of live and let live, when in reality what they mean is do no harm and let us do harm. That's what I get out of it. So yeah, definitely a good final note there, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, thanks for having me, guys.
Yep. You have
Thanks
a good
for
one.
being on.
You too.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, Mormonism's. I don't know if
Something else.
you all are aware of this, but I was a Mormon. I know I never talk about it. I never bring it
Whoa.
up. I was a Mormon once upon a time, and yeah. So when I hear those stories out of that church specifically, and apply it to so I didn't lose. I definitely lost a ton of respect within my family, though I think a lot of them already suspected I wasn't that firm of a believer by the end. It affected the way my family spoke with me, and it changed a lot. And so in a way, without actually being shunned, it was the constant awareness, because people were informing me of this, that my entire family would gather at times basically to talk crap about me. And I was the first member actually out first member of my family actually to leave the church. I now have two brothers who have followed. But yeah, it's just one of those, the churches, they make one of the best cases for why religious fundamentalism is actively extremely harmful. We'll obviously field questions about things less than that level of severity, because there's a discussion to be had really at any level of religiosity. There's a discussion to be had about whether or not it's harmful or not, even if the most basic version of that is essentially, does encouraging faith as a method that people can get to truth, if it can be demonstrated that faith is not useful in doing that, is that itself harmful? The encouragement of people engaging in faith-based beliefs, which I would argue it is, but certainly not on the same level of Mormonism, which is why I can collab and have lovely, warm relationships with people like Ocean or God is Gray. Any thoughts there, Shannon?
No, actually, I agree. That's all I can say.
Seconded. Perfect. We will head to St. Louis, Missouri, where we are going to talk to Megan. Megan, are you there?
Hi, Megan.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hey, what did you want to talk about, Megan?
So I am a little bit of backstory, short backstory, I promise.
Sure.
I worked for a church for about a year and a half as a youth ministry. I was supposed to be an intern, and then I took over the program before I kind of was deconverted, I guess, from the Lutheran religion, is what I was. And while I was in charge of the youth ministry department, I did a lot with sex education. A lot of what I now understand was deeply rooted purity culture. We didn't have the used gum or the duct tape analogy. We had the torn paper analogy, where you would take a piece of paper and tear it up, and that was all the pieces of yourself you were giving away to someone else. So I guess my question is, for those of us who were in that and who taught that, I mean, I feel like I indoctrinated a lot of young women. I taught middle schoolers at that point, and it was a few years ago. So I guess my question is kind of, for those of us who have been through that, is there a way that we can help reverse some of that harm that we did that?
I'm going to let Shannon answer first, because I desperately need to jump off camera and get some water. And so that's why I'm going to disappear from the screen. But I do have thoughts when the two of you are done. So I will be back.
Okay. So, so I appreciate more than anything that you recognize that. That's a massive step, Megan. It's Megan, right? That's correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's a massive step that you can look now and recognize that. Like the first step for you, I think, would be to recognize, and I hope that you do this already, that the position that you were in initially is a position that you were in because you had the best of intentions, even though you didn't have the best of information. So
I do recognize that. I was raised in the religion and everything, so I get that piece of it, but
that's
it
important.
just now being, yeah.
So
now being like, in the feminist culture that I'm in, I realize I potentially had a hand in having some pretty crappy, crummy effects on people.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I appreciate you for being able to have that recognition. So there's a million different ways that you can affect positive change in the world, and everybody has different strengths. So there is no one answer. Like I can't say, go into the same position that you were in, only do the opposite, right? You even calling in on this show right now is an opportunity for the people that are listening to this show to maybe recognize if they're in a position that you were in, that maybe they should change their mind. Like that can have a positive effect. You advocating for positive things on social media, you being a positive influence on women that are currently in your lives, women and girls that are currently in your lives. Those are all things that can affect that type of change. There's myriad ways that you can do that. But I don't want you to focus on feeling as though you have to make up for that damage. It's better to want to advocate for positive change than to feel like you need to make some sort of reconciliation or compensation for past harm. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, that definitely does.
Okay.
In your experience, like what are some of the best things to focus on? Because I feel like my kind of journey away from that was almost more natural. It started with political stuff. My parents became very disenfranchised when the 2016 election, with all that chaos. And so I felt like for me personally, they kind of led the way for me to become more disenchanted, I guess, with religion in that way. So I guess St. Louis, and I live in St. Charles, which is very conservative. Like what could I do with that in this kind of culture to help other people through that? Does that make sense?
If I might, part of it is going to be identifying what your strengths are first and then extending those resources in ways that are useful. So whether it's joining a local secular group and offering those strengths up, like with myself, the thoughts that I had when you first called in is, and I need to take a lot of Shannon's advice that she gave you myself, because a large part of what drives me on this channel is the knowledge that there are 3 human beings right now that are active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that were baptized because of me. And so I've, since starting this channel, received now at least hundreds of emails from people who said that I was a major part in them leaving the church, and somehow none of that balances those 3 people for me. Like the idea of doing the reverse of that, now apparently hundreds of times, those 3 people weigh down on me a lot. And then also I would have reinforced the faith of a lot of people. At times I was a substitute seminary teacher for my dad, and in general was just an active participant. I also did missionary exchanges, which is where basically you drive the missionaries to different places and you participate in the lessons that they're teaching. And so there were more people who were baptized for that reason as well. And so I try to focus on the positivity and the things that I've accomplished, but I won't pretend that, again, I've got to follow a lot of Shannon's advice as well, because that still weighs on me, and I try not to let it too much. So one of the things that I identified over the last few years as I was having conversations prior to the channel with people who were having faith crises was that I was apparently good at talking to them and was good at asking them questions, telling them about my own journey, and relating to them because and these weren't even just ex-Mormons. These were people who are just questioning their faith in general. One of my, someone who became a close friend was an ex-Catholic, or is now an ex-Catholic, but we had been talking a lot, and I realized that method of communication was something I was apparently skilled at. And the only problem there was that I still had to do it face-to-face with people, which is not good with my personality so much. So it turns out I can much more comfortably speak to a camera than I can to other human beings. And that was why, I wouldn't say it was the reason why I started my channel, but it was the reason why, when I knew I wanted to do something with a communication, something that was communication based would fit what my quote unquote, at least perceived of myself talents are. And I'm sure many people can argue whether or not my perceptions were correct, but, I get feedback of all kinds. And so I think it starts with identifying what your skills and talents are, and then trying to figure out how you can apply that more broadly to movements and social causes. And it doesn't even just have to be trying to make the world more atheist. It can be anything that is for the advancement of humans, for the good of humans.
It sounds like you're passionate about empowering and educating women. Like if that's a field that you chose prior, then utilize the skill set that you've had. Stories are powerful. Like, tell your story to people so that they can relate to that story. Work on communication tactics. Help to build up your ability to, relate to the people around you. Utilize social media is a powerful tool, like Jimmy said, and that's great advice. Find what your strength is, and then learn to build your passion into that strength. That's the best of it. Like, you'll know what your strength is. Build your passion into it, and then find a conduit through which you can enact that passion, utilizing that strength. That would be the advice that I give you.
Totally agree.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was also much more elegant and shorter than me just stumbling on for the... So, yeah. This is why it's like, we want to get as many calls as possible, but there's that whole Jimmy aspect of it all.
Just pulling us all down. You're at least wearing my shirt. I'll take you.
True.
You have that going for you. You're wearing my merch.
You'll
get away with a little bit more from me today.
My sexual humanist hoodie. I also have 2 sexual humanist T-shirts that I often sleep in. Oh yeah. I'm not much of a T-shirt out and about kind of guy, unless I put like a button-down collared shirt underneath it, roll the sleeves over. But it's been the colder months lately, so not been doing that as much recently. Many more hoodies as of late. Anyway, Megan, I hope were you able to find hopefully something useful out of this conversation?
Yes, definitely. I really appreciate both of your feedback. I know this wasn't exactly the kind of topic y'all were looking for, but I really appreciate that and helping how to right some of the wrongs that happened.
It was relevant, and I think it will be helpful for other people listening in a big way. So I wouldn't say it was off topic at all. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
Guys.
Thank you, Megan. Do you ever do the thing where when you hear it's the same first name as somebody you know, you're just waiting to be like, wait a second, is this Megan from Digital Hammurabi? That's exactly what it was.
That beautiful British accent.
Absolutely.
Gorgeous, beautiful British accent that woman has.
Megan from Digital Hammurabi, for those of you who don't know, is who does those intro lines at the very beginning where it's tonight on the line. And she's a wonderful friend of both of ours. She and Dr. Bowen just wrote a book together. If you want to learn how to read ancient Sumerian, you can...
They wrote a second book. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Their second book just came out yesterday, and it's about biblical slavery. So they have a book on how to read ancient Sumerian, which is wonderful. I have that on my desk over there, and they just put out a book on biblical slavery like yesterday. So they have two now.
Which is excellent, because there are a lot of people who try to rewrite the biblical slavery. And remember from the episode with Matt and I that we were at least 20. I assume that the book by them will take 20 days to read, because that was how long the guy said we would need to have our lessons from him for 20 days before we could even. Yeah, here's hoping he calls in.
Wants to fight with me. Maybe I'm intimidating.
Dragnot is watching, so he definitely is going to go get that guy now. that was his buddy. But we're not opening a special line for him. You got to play the game the regular way if you want in this time. All right, we're going to head to Utah and speak to Amanda. And just so people know, it does look like we might have a little bit of conflict coming up, but not from Amanda here necessarily. I can't say for sure. Amanda in Utah, what did you want to talk about?
Hey, Jimmy.
Hi.
So I guess to introduce myself. So I'm also an ex-Mormon. I grew up in a really small Mormon community and then went to college and transitioned from Mormonism to atheism, humanism. And now I've settled on the Satanic Temple brand of Satanism.
Okay.
So, my question for you is, and the reason why I find this interesting is, can religion, in terms of having a community around an ideology that has some form of accountability and structure, be helpful? Or is having no religion in terms of that community the overall end goal? Is that the best way to move forward? Or is having a community that's not around a god, sky daddy, fine as long as it doesn't believe in that? You know what I mean?
So this is where one of the things that first gets tricky is the fact that we have multiple uses of religion. So, for example, atheism is not a religion. However, it is a protected religious class, so it is legally protected in the United States anyway, as though it is a religion. So when you have something like the Satanic Temple, and you go with the traditional definition of what a religion is, that religion is supposed to be centered around the belief and worship of supernatural beings. And so I have yet to meet even a Satanic Temple Satanist who literally believes Satan is real. So it's more of a simulated kind of worship, and oftentimes is even sort of meant to be a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? They want people to engage with them on the idea that their religion would be as valid as any, if religion is something that you have to legally accommodate. So that's where the first thing, when I'm talking about religion, I'm talking about people basically going to an organization, being taught methods of getting to truth where the methodology is not put under the appropriate amount of scrutiny, where they are trying to reinforce your beliefs with something like faith. This concept that, and I'm not talking about faith as in the new colloquial use as in confidence, I'm talking about Hebrews 11 faith, which is the concept that essentially you can just know something is true. You can just know it. And your feelings can be, and your hope can be as good as knowledge. I think even when that is the case, religion isn't necessarily going to be massively harmful, and I think that there are going to be communities that are generally very good people doing very good things. This is, again, the person I think I collaborate the most with on my channel is a progressive Christian. And it's not because I want there to be more progressive Christians, because I still think that there is a harm in teaching people to find knowledge based on faith. However, I know that she is a good person, and that the causes that they work on together are causes I could attend and not feel remotely remotely out of place. I've said it to her many times too, that I think if she were to go to a hotel and 2 conventions were going on, and one was just a general Christian convention and the other was a secular humanist convention, I think she'd find more camaraderie on the secular humanist side than the general Christian side. And so community is an important thing. What people are doing is an important thing. I've lost any sort of grand notions that one day we're just going to convince everybody to not take things on faith and to not take their feelings more seriously than they should. I've also transitioned from this person I was when I first got into atheism that was kind of like feelings never matter to feelings don't make a case for what is true or not, but disregarding people's feelings altogether is no way to build a positive movement either. And so communities, yes, are good. Religion didn't invent communities, but they've certainly experimented with lots of things you can do with a community, and there may be things to gather from it. But we need to be clear, too, when we're talking about, is religion harmful? I'm talking about that thing I described, not the general cause of anything that would be considered a protected religious class in a country like the United States. Now, cool. Shannon is going to summarize what I said way better and in like 10 seconds. Watch.
No, actually, I have a bit more than 10 seconds. So it seems to me that what you may be referencing is something more akin to like a Durkheimian model of religious adherence, which doesn't necessarily mention or reference the supernatural components of religion, but is more so like a community of practice that's organized around tenets of adherence and sacred principles and practices and rituals. Now, that is why most people are able to classify things like humanism and Satanism into the religious classifications. Now, to say they're good and bad would be entirely dependent upon whether or not you're going to individually assess the tenets themselves. The tenets themselves are what's important. I mean, community is a sort of ambiguous, sort of innocuous concept that, there's a multitude of types of communities that are good and or are bad based on the tenets and principles that cohere them. So you can't. Religion is one of the reasons that people form communities. There's also a multitude of other reasons that people form communities. Usually it's because they have a likened mindset, or there's something that's attractive about those tenets that adhere them. Now, when it comes to the Satanic Temple, I think that there's probably a lot of things that I would look at. I'm not super familiar with them. I know some of their work, like putting up the statues of satanic figures next to 10 Commandments. I think that's brilliant. I think that's beautiful because the juxtaposition allows everybody to have the awareness that, oh, okay, you're giving this religion special treatment, and the action of that juxtaposition is something that I respect, because they share values with me in that aspect. But there may, if I look into the tenets, be aspects that I don't necessarily agree with. But they're not a deistic religion. They're not a religion that has a deity that has mandated to them. These are the immutable tenets that must be adhered to. The thing about secular religious practice, when you look at the Durkheimian model, is that secular religious practices are open to you revising, reviewing, and critiquing those tenets and manifesting them in different fashions over time based on their effectiveness and efficacy and relation to the group. So that would be the differentiation for me, and that would be why I would say that that the tenets themselves matter. Did I articulate that okay?
I certainly thought so.
Yeah.
Okay. It was reminding me too of how there was a sect of Buddhism that there was a leader. I don't know if it was one of the big deal guys, but I remember there being somebody pretty high up saying, when asked what would happen if science debunked some part of their religion, and they said Buddhism would have to change. It wasn't the we would. In other words, they were and
not
so
Ken Ham.
Yeah,
that's wrong.
It's like those sorts of religions aren't the ones that I'm going let's start a fight. I'm not. I don't become Mr. Pumpkin for the progressive and the secular embracing religions. Yeah, not. It just doesn't happen. Is that helpful to you at all, Amanda?
Yeah. I guess my follow-up question to that is, so I think we all agree on, like, we're on the same page here that a community that's based around tenets that we find are accountable, humanistic, they are accountable to science and our understanding of science as it is now, are generally not harmful. So my question would be, like, I talked to some people leading up to this call in my satanic Discord, and they're saying that they found Satanism more helpful for them than humanism because they couldn't really find that community that they were looking for. And I realize this maybe isn't quite as pertinent to the religion question, but where Satanism calls itself and legally is considered a religion, is that like the one case where it can be helpful as long as it's accountable to science and our best understanding of what's best for people?
Again, I wouldn't actually be using the word religion to describe Satanism the same way. I'd call it a club or something. It would be like until I'm meeting Satanists, and I, again, haven't met a single one who believes in and worships, what's his name, Amenemhotep, whatever the full name of Amenemhotep, some version of Satan, then at that point, it does sound like you have a club, as long as the principles are still relatively humanistic, because I've had a hard time finding superior moral systems to secular humanism, at least in my opinion. So I would say that you're more talking about a positive organization and club, and because of the cultural narrative that they're participating in, are classified as a religion. And that makes sense. That's not the sense in which I am trying to, I guess, have the conversation about whether or not a religion causes harm. In fact, in a way, they like being identified as a religion of Satanism more because it annoys Christians than because it's actually a religion of Satanism. If that makes sense. If that I had two sentences in my mind at the same time, and I tried to say both for some reason.
It may also depend too on what the individual person is looking for when it comes to a set of tenets or moral practices to adhere to. If you would like that to be coupled with rituals and practices in a community, then I can understand why Satanism would be attractive, because they're aggregated, like they're all aggregated together. Whereas what, like you mentioned, perhaps sexual humanism, that's my religion that I made out of secular humanism.
That is a pretty good one. That might be the superior to secular humanism.
Yeah, actually, sexual humanism is a superior religion. We send trans students to university in the name of Ken Ham. So nice. I mean, come on. But yeah, so like if it comes down to what an individual is looking for when you're religion shopping, which is what it sounds like to me. Like if you want a religion that doesn't have an actual deity, has components of morality and tenets of adherence that are valuable to society and culpable to the observable perceptions that we have of reality, and you also want a sense of community that has a certain aesthetic, then and that's your fit, then that's your fit, right? Like there's no saying, like there's no objectively saying this one is better because X, Y, and Z, because everybody's individual preferences when they're searching for communities or when they're searching for a religion is malleable based on their individual perspective. So I don't think that it's a contest. If it was, sexual humanism would win, but I completely understand what you're saying. Like if you get value in it and you feel as though that there's not a mandated set of adherent practices and tenets that you must adhere to unquestionably. Otherwise, you're going to be shunned or eternally punished, and you don't feel as though there's a mental, it's placing you in mental anguish if you deign to question these tenets, and you feel as though they're malleable to the views of reality and have the best interest of society in mind, and they're collaborative, and the ritual components of it are solely because of our human instincts to desire these components of community practice. Then sure, like, have at it. Like, don't hurt me, I don't hurt you, live let live, peace, love. But yeah, so I just don't think it's a competition, I guess, if that makes sense.
Oh no, yeah, and I definitely would never argue that it is a competition.
Yeah.
I just think it's kind of interesting as somebody who, I have a degree in anthropology, so I've looked at a lot of religion in different cultures, and it led me out of Mormonism. Funny how that goes.
Yeah. No,
but you knew
consistent.
exactly who Durkheim was when I brought him up then. That's awesome.
It's actually pretty consistent too. Also, there's a lot of people who enter fields. Like, it's funny too when you talk to ex-Mormon anthropologists or other related fields, or you even just talk to with ex-Mormon anthropologists in related fields, you ask them if they think the Book of Mormon is true, they immediately feel like they have to start responding to all the things that Mormons are going to say that are just dishonest apologetics regarding why it is. And then when you just talk to one who's not an ex-Mormon, they just laugh. They're like, nope, it's very clearly a fraud. It is not true. And so it's fun to see the dichotomy between those two similar but different groups, the ex-Mormons versus the, as we're saying, it's not a competition, and I'm making up some verses. Thank you very much for calling in, Amanda. I got to tell you also, with what I was saying before about when somebody calls in and you're expecting it to be somebody, my first significant girlfriend in high school was named Amanda, and I knew she moved to Utah and got married. And a few years ago, we completely lost touch. I wouldn't know where to begin to get back in touch with her if I wanted to. So I was like, oh, could it be? Could it? But it wasn't. So that's all good.
It's a generic name. Understand.
No worries.
Thanks, Amanda.
Well, thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.
All right.
All right.
The first hour went by so fast.
Have we already been talking for an hour? That's bananas.
I know.
Oh,
we started we had the stream on, but I think there was 2 or 3 minutes of that hold screen right at the beginning. So we're getting close to an hour. We're within 5 minutes.
Oh,
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we are going to head to. Oh, I need to be better about taking that off of the screen too when they hang up.
Just be better. Generally. Just be better, Jimmy.
You don't got to tell me. Wow, I feel like I'm a kid at home again with my family.
Jimmy, be better.
Madison, in Kansas, how you doing?
Hi, Madison.
I'm good. Hi.
Good. Madison, what did you want to talk about?
Well, I've been caused harm kind of by science, and I wanted to talk about that side of it and ask for advice.
Okay.
Because frankly, I'm a little bit at a loss.
We've got to start then with an important question, because when you say the phrase, I've been harmed by science, that straight out does not compute to me. So the first question I have to ask you is, what is science in regards to the statement you're making? Not specifically, we'll get into the specifics of what happened if you want to talk about that, but first, just on the surface level, what is the definition or what use of the word science are you using here?
The current at the time best practices of psychology.
Okay, so for the and this is actually something Shannon's going to be much more qualified to speak to. When a person says science to me, I'm thinking of the scientific method, and so that's why I said it didn't compute, because when you say science harmed me, and to me the word science means how you basically the method by which you verify that something is likely the case, likely true or not true as far as the mechanics and how things work. Yeah, that's generally the working the thing I get. So we're actually going to talk about not that science, but the modern understanding of psychology, and probably more specifically the person you were consulting with caused harm. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, that's not a bad summary. Are either of you familiar with seclusion?
I'm finding it very difficult to hear you. You're cutting in and out.
I think she asked if we're familiar with seclusion.
Is this better?
Yes, I think so.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are either of you familiar with the practice of seclusion?
Seclusion? I'm familiar with the concept of seclusion, yes.
When I was 13, I was secluded as punishment. Picture about a room the size of a bathroom stall with nothing in it, just the padded walls, one pillow on the tile floor, one window that was too high up for me to see. That was what they thought was the best thing that they could do when kids misbehaved or was disruptive. I was lucky. I was only in there for a maximum of 2 hours. I know a kid who was in there for 6 hours.
Can I ask?
And where did this take place?
Yeah,
where did this take place? Give me one. Where did this take place?
In a public school in Kansas.
This was in school?
Yep. Public school in Kansas. Yeah. And I told people about it, and I protested it and was told basically I was crazy, that it must never happen there, and yet in November, ProPublica and the Chicago Tribune actually uncovered a lot of what I experienced and what I was talking about. They reviewed 20,000 documents about seclusion and cases in which children were secluded, some in Kansas, mostly in Illinois, and about the absolute horror that went on in there. And I realized that 15 years in science journalism, sometime to have a turnaround like that from "you must be crazy, this could never possibly happen" to "we acknowledge this is happening and people are working to help" is incredibly short. But, it was 15 years, and I did attempt suicide during that time, so I might not have seen that revision of what happened. And I feel like there are a lot of groups of people who just aren't listened to by science and by scientific literature, by scientists more accurately.
Okay. I don't want to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I feel like I'm getting your gist. And as somebody who studied psychology, I'm gonna say a couple of things here, and I hope you're receptive to them. I'm not sure at what point in time this took place for you. First, I'm going to start by apologizing that it did, because there's absolutely no way it should have, and attempt to reassure you that based on current psychological practices, that would be seen as incredibly harmful. Any sort of seclusion or segregation or isolation, especially for a child, is not a best practice to be utilized. It is not recognized by the current field of psychology. There have been times in the past when psychology is a relatively new field, when things like that, archaic methodologies, before we started to employ hypothetical constructs and utilizing them in our research methodology, where people use sort of an intuitive sense of what they thought would help to cause people to adhere to behavioral standards, what effective, whether or not they were beneficial or harmful. They were focused more on behavioral outcomes, like Skinner type behavioral outcomes for effectiveness. Now, it could be the case, I don't know your specific circumstance, that somebody was utilizing that type of practice, even though it's archaic and isn't something that would be adhered to or supported by anybody in the American Psychological Association, the Psychiatric Association, or any current practicing psychologist, psychiatrist, or counselor. I just flat out will tell you that is not where the science sits. It just isn't. That doesn't negate what happened to you, but there are a multitude of reasons that something like that could have happened. It could have been because somebody was using perceived behavioral outcomes as their goal, and sort of doing some sort of conditioning to attempt to get that behavioral outcome because it had effectiveness without looking at the harm that it was caused, that could be caused. So I really, really, really apologize that you experienced that, and I hope that you can actually look to the current fields to help you cope with those scenarios. And I'm sorry that people didn't listen to you. And I hope that whatever advocacy that you're currently doing will be beneficial in preventing that from happening to somebody else. Because if it is something that is still currently taking place, people should be screaming. And this is somebody who has a degree in psychology that I'm touching right now, saying that people should be screaming.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
I want to bring up this too, sort of bringing it to the original topic. While I can't speak to the specifics of your case, it does seem to be the case that there is a culture that has come out largely from religion and religious thinking that has sort of bastardized the idea of what is science or how does science work. Because as Shannon is explaining that this isn't the scientific understanding, it also means that if people were saying that was the science, at some point their use of that was just flat out wrong or mistaken. And so you have this situation where we see this in all kinds of social issues. We've seen it even in the past few decades as states have gotten away from allowing corporal punishment at school. We see it in the way that so much religious opposition to having a queer identity, whether it is your orientation or your gender, they like to cite science without an actual understanding of how science works. The kind of people who say, there's only men and women, that's just science. And then you ask them to actually show them how it's just science, because you've actually been studying it and have a great deal of number of studies and actual science that demonstrate that that gender rather is not a binary. And in other words, there's this bastardized idea of if we tried something and it seems like it worked, or even worse, that I think comes out of religious culture largely, this was done to me and I turned out okay, that people mistake those kinds of things for science versus religion. And you see that also in reinforcement with things like circumcision and other types of practices, that there isn't actually a demonstration of these things being useful. But when you start with the conclusion of, I have this idea that corporal punishment or restraining somebody to a very confined space or whatever actually helps and is good, and you set the test parameters aiming for that result, these people, when they then get that result, go, we did science. And so, funny enough, where it seems like, not to say that you were calling to argue or anything, but where it seemed like you were wanting to discuss a sort of counter idea that science, in fact, caused harm. This is one where I see, even if it's not, you can't call it the religious culture, something that is culturally reinforced by religion as a harmful, and I don't have a better word than bastardization of what of how they use the word science.
I've one more thing to say before we. Oh, sorry, Madison. I think that it's a question of the ethics surrounding how knowledge is used as well, right? So that, like, if I'm understanding your perspective, they found this to be an effective way to placate or de-escalate, I guess, whatever that may mean in this scenario, a child who is behaving badly, or get them to adhere to their constructs. Now, there is some science that potentially was utilized there when you look at the field of psychology when it comes to behavioral outcomes, but it wasn't used in an ethical fashion in the same way that the science utilized to create a nuclear bomb can be used in an ethical fashion, right? Or utilized to create certain types of chemicals or diseases. Like, that science itself is amoral. It's just knowledge. It's how people enact that knowledge that makes it either beneficial or harmful. It's their motivations. And unfortunately with psychology,
agree.
because yeah, so, and again, I really apologize. I understand what you're saying, because there's aspects of psychology that, if wielded, if known very well, if you can traverse them very, very well, and they're known to you, and you can wield them effectively, you can manipulate people, you can harm people, you can abuse people.
Works. Learned helplessness is a thing, but it's not ethical.
It's exactly right. And that's one of the reasons the other tenets of psychology, like the good ethical practices of psychology, are so imperative, because there's so many different types of emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and manipulation tactics that can be utilized on people. And the only way to arm yourself against them and to recover from them is to, again, delve into that field so that you can look at how to arm yourself with the defense mechanisms in order to counteract it, so that you can prevent yourself from being a victim of it by recognition of how it instantiates itself and how it manifests in an individual who's attempting to utilize those components on you. And and I've been in an emotionally abusive relationship, so believe me, I get this. If you've had to come through it and are out the other side, looking to the tenets of psychology to help with recovery are also beneficial. So it's not the science itself that's harmful, it's how people utilize the information once it's available. And that's couched within their individual belief structures. It's how it's wielded. But the only antidote to it is more knowledge.
And I agree. And I am in therapy, and I am doing what you say. I guess what I'm trying to get at is often I feel like there is a dismissive tone to those of us. Well, when it's happening to you, everybody says that it's science, and everybody says that you can't complain because it's science. And it becomes almost indistinguishable from science and hard to fight. And you can feel incredibly helpless against this. And even coming out of it, you don't... I firmly believe that, like Martin Luther King said, or he's attributed to it, said that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. I believe that the arc of science is long, but it bends towards truth, and that we will get to places where none of this is ever practiced, where this is as archaic and bizarre as lobotomies. And
Yes.
but I don't know if that will be in 5 years or in 200 years, and I've got to live now. I guess that's what my thing is. I know that this isn't good science. I know that it isn't true science. I know that it's scientists' biases and manipulative people's stuff, but at some point, if everybody keeps saying that something is X and you know it's Y, just to get by in society, you have to treat it as X.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, as far as if you're trying to avoid the social consequences and such, obviously that's the case. And this is when we get into talking about fundamentalism and the way that all looks, you have the out group versus the in group. And so that's the X group versus the Y group. And the out group or the in group, it's not what size they are. Often matters more to a lot of people than what the actual facts behind are. So the best that we can be doing is advocating for truth. I think that in our country, we're like, it's something like 35th in math and sciences, but we're like first in arrogance and confidence that we're right. And that's something that we need
Look
to...
at our president.
Yeah, that's something we certainly need to address. I know, and the phrase "our president" it's literally true, but it feels wrong. You know.
Not for me. I'm Canadian.
Yeah, Shannon's Canadian.
It feels so wrong.
Yeah, and so advocating for truth, figuring out. The nice thing with the newest resources out there, and unfortunately it's been a good thing and a bad thing, but when used as a good thing, is that you can find communities of people with similar values, and if what you value is actually good science, you can usually find those communities. Would I say it's sometimes a bad thing? Obviously, 10 years ago, most American Nazis were in hiding, and they use the same resources to find each other, so it's not as though it's always... It's kind of like science. The tools are amoral. How they were utilized were very negative. And so, yeah, that's something definitely to be concerned about. I'm glad to see, though, just because of the way the topic was put in my screening here, I'm glad to see, though, that you differentiate the idea of what people say people say this is science versus people actually doing good science, and so that's good to hear.
Yes.
Thank you, Madison.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate
thank
you
you
contributing
for
toward
letting me on.
that arc of change.
absolutely.
Well, thanks for not turning off of me immediately when you saw what my question was.
No, of course not.
Of course not.
No. I do hang up on people, but very rarely immediately. I mean, there are some topics I would have immediately. And if somebody tells me on a topic that I actually know plenty, that I'm 20 days away from even being able to hold a conversation with them, at that point, what's the point of even continuing the conversation?
Well, actually, I'm an Argentinian preacher, if you didn't know yet.
Oh, good. Well, apparently you're one of the good ones. Thanks. Thanks for calling in, Madison.
That almost killed me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right. I think this last topic is going to actually may be the most fun of the evening. We are going to head to Georgia, and we're going to talk to Arden. And by the way, Arden is one of my favorite names. I have a friend in my life who I adore, also named Arden. I'm a big fan of the name. So Arden, we're off to a good start because I am biased toward liking you.
Thank you. I chose the name myself, actually.
Perfect. Absolutely wonderful. I also chose Jimmy myself. It's not my real name. Little fun fact there. What about you, Shannon?
My name is Shannon.
Wow.
I'm not that clever. It was picked for me
Oh, well.
by my Irish dad.
Not so bad. I've seen lots of other names people have called you, and I'm glad you haven't adopted many of them. The internet is a cruel, dark place. Though you did at one point adopt, what was it, Queen of Thoughtlandia, something like that?
Queen of Thoughtlandia. Yeah, actually, my Twitter handle right now says Shannon Q Concentrated Liquid Stupidity, because that was one of my favorite comments.
Yes. And then High Priestess of Sexual Humanism, I think, was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yes,
good stuff.
Right. Well, that's just a title that I have. That's a real title. But.
Indeed. Anyway, Arden, this needs to be about you and not us. So what did you want to talk about?
I wanted to talk about how religion in itself isn't harmful, but it's the people and the way they interpret it that is.
Interesting. Okay.
All right. Let's start with an example, I think. Could you give us an example of a religion that, because we were just talking about, obviously this concept exists. Science, for example, is something that is amoral. But when we're talking about religion, the practice of believing in and worshiping a supernatural being, that if you can give us an example that is not harmful, and we can discuss whether or not we agree.
For example, I've had experience with both of them, and the religion that I'm currently with, from my experience, it tends to not be harmful. People tend to keep to themselves, not really talk about it much. They don't try and convert people, and the number one thing is to essentially be kind to everyone and stuff.
Okay. And certainly I'm not going to say any of those principles you just shared. Now, as far as keeping to yourself and stuff, I don't personally believe in keeping to myself, but I do believe in making sure those things that I don't keep to myself are beneficial and are ethical, and I try to share that only which is good, and then add a couple of stupid jabs in there to make my show entertaining. So there's the two things. But regarding your religion, I assume that the entirety of the religion isn't just be good to each other. Is there then a supernatural aspect to your religion?
There is. It's Wiccan, and it has a belief that there is a god and goddess and more, but there's many aspects to it, and the aspect that I follow is that essentially the gods and goddesses, like the Greek gods and the Roman gods, are essentially based off nature. And so really all I do is I believe in science and nature, and the gods and goddesses are just humanized aspects of them. And the main thing is essentially respect nature.
But I want to get to the meat of the belief there then. Do you believe that these literal human forms of nature, do you believe that they literally exist?
No.
So
not in that way, no.
So really in other words, it sounds like the characters in your religion are more of a category that you've made. Again, you mentioned a supernatural, but it doesn't sound like you actually believe in the supernatural, but you might have a practice or rituals or something that, in other words, when you talk about Wiccan, there are some Wiccan people who believe when they perform a spell via a supernatural process that spell at some point is actualized. It actually, so whether it's a good spell in the hopes of, I don't know, rain, or a bad spell in the hopes of revenge against somebody you are spiteful toward, that actually the spell is what causes, essentially it's like prayer. That those people who believe that their prayers are heard by somebody, and that there is a process by which the prayer is actualized. So the spell, the same sort of process by which it is actualized. Is that a belief you literally hold?
I believe that it's possible that there is something like magic out there that hasn't been found, but I don't know if that is true or not. But I do think that really the thing with spells is it's a lot of a psychological thing, where if you do a spell to love yourself more, then that can help you to feel more self-love. Now,
sure.
I don't put it over science, but I'm not going to say that there isn't such thing as magic, but I'm not going to say that there is either.
So what and I promise I don't mean this in a condescending way. There's just not better words for it. And this was something I was getting on at earlier. What it sounds like you're describing to me, and if you want to give me the reasons why I'm wrong, it's totally, I'm open to hear that. But I don't feel like I'm listening to the description of a Wiccan religion. I feel like I'm listening to the description of a Wiccan club, essentially. Again, I totally understand the religious categorizations. I understand that you have the rituals and those kinds of things are a big part of it. But if it lacks that literal belief that those religious beings exist or that some supernatural power is afoot, even if you don't discount the possibility, and mind you, I don't discount the possibilities of almost anything. As I mentioned in the episode with Matt Dillahunty, when I say that I know something is true, even then I don't mean the word know. I mean, I have as much confidence as I could that that is true, not necessarily an all-out knowledge. So when we're talking about these different, we have to be careful with our terms. We have to be careful with what we're describing. So I don't mean it in a condescending way when I say this sounds less like a religion and more like a club, even if you enjoy religious protections. Because again, that's how it is with atheism. As an atheist in the United States, we have to be classified as a member of the atheist religion to receive these legal protections. And it's a necessity. And I don't want those religious protections to go away, but atheism literally isn't a religion. There's by no stretch, or there's no way to actually make that justification. But as a religious class, it can. So if I'm incorrect, and you're saying no, well, there are these beliefs and these supernatural things, not discounting, because again, I won't discount the possibility that the actual world of Harry Potter is happening just outside of my vision, outside of my periphery, and I'm incapable of conceiving it. I have no reason to believe that's actually happening, and so I sort of operate my life as though it's not happening, but I don't discount the possibility, because that's trying to prove something isn't, as opposed to proving something is, which in some cases is impossible, and in most cases is at least extremely difficult. So I'll give the floor back to you if you want to correct my term use there.
And I get what you're saying, and I think you're kind of right. I'm still fairly new, so I'm still kind of settling into exactly what I believe, but it's kind of a pantheistic approach to it, where it's like, it's the way I view the gods is essentially, it's just nature and science. And it's kind of a mix between actual God in the traditional term and nature, I guess.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I would suggest that you were born into a world that everyone was just saying gods exist and gods are necessary. And so you haven't quite left that sort of mindset where you go, okay, I still feel the drive and the push to identify a god because it still feels like I must. And it seems like maybe that's where this belief is coming out, as opposed to, again, what we're talking about with religion. Anyway, Shannon, now be much smarter than me.
I'm chomping at the bit. So it sounds to me as though you have the same like prospective view of reality that, somebody like me, somebody who's a professed atheist, probably more philosophically agnostic, would profess, only you're seeking to wrap it in rituals and practices that allow that experience of reality to have more imbued meaning, so that it can resonate with you on a different level. And in order to do that, you can relate more to Wiccan practices because they allow you to have that perception of reality that comports to reality, while still simultaneously enjoying and benefiting from the psychological affect of ritualistic and potentially community practices. Because if I've heard you correctly, you've said that you don't necessarily believe in the literality of any sort of deity in this religion. You also don't believe that there's any sort of real supernatural component to the practices of the religion. So it doesn't even seem like, from my perspective, that it would be like a full throttle religion. It's just a more ritualistic manner in which to engage with reality.
Yeah. I
that
wouldn't.
fairly accurate.
What Shannon just
Okay.
described is our experiences I'm open to. Again, I have no actual religious or spiritual attachment to something like paganism, but when I talk to my friend Ocean, I'm like, I'm definitely going to go dance in the woods with you sometime. That
Hells
sounds
yes.
awesome. And I'm open to whatever experience that has. I'm open to chanting the words to Odin. I just have no expectation that there's an Odin that's going to receive them. And even within those sorts of religions, you have a different level of faith where it's more like I have gotten very positive response from this. I see that this religion does no harm, or this religious practice, I should say, because that muddies what I was just saying, that this religious practice isn't causing harm and I'm enjoying the community, and therefore this is going to be the way I express myself, this part of my personality. And there are people who are like that, and then that ranges up to, I suspect these gods actually exist, I believe these gods actually exist, or the people who proclaim to know these gods actually exist. So again, I really hope that nobody was offended when I was using the phrase more of a Wiccan club. I don't have a better, I don't know. I can't think of a better way to articulate what I mean, but I don't mean it in a like trying to demean as though it's less than a religion as in an actual community.
Of course
because
not.
I think that Wiccan clubs would be, in my opinion, probably a superior type of community than an actual religion and religious community, personally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about Wicca, is that it ranges from person to person of exactly where your belief comes from. And on what you had said earlier, I actually come from an atheist household, and so I'm kind of hiding in my room to call in right now because I know my family isn't exactly supportive of this kind of conversation.
Yeah. I would say
perhaps you could articulate to them that it sounds to me like you still, to a certain degree, are atheistic. And speaking as a mom, like I got a little dude. Perhaps in articulating this with your parents or your familial environment, you can just articulate to them that this is more a series of ritualistic practices that give you a psychological affect that, you know, that experience is valuable to you. The experience of engaging in these ritualistic practices and meeting with this community is valuable to you, and you don't really necessarily have any sort of intellectual attachment to any sort of deity or supernatural component, and you think that the two can comport with an atheistic belief system like theirs, and they may be more receptive to you after having that type of dialogue, if that's something that you think is plausible.
On the other side of that
Thank
too,
you for that help.
Yeah, that's definitely really good advice for working with your parents. I want to say too, on the other side of it, it sounds like you were describing that your community has a range of that sort of level of belief and faith, and I would be extremely cautious and especially considerate when you are around those people who are describing and trying to advocate for the concept of knowledge based on faith, that you don't go down, because faith isn't something that's just easy to fall for. There's reasons why it can be very appealing. It definitely makes you feel special. Religion, there's no doubt that it causes, in certain circumstances, the same sort of rush of chemicals in your brain that make you feel good and make you feel happy. And so as a person it sounds like you're coming from an atheistic family, and hopefully that means you've learned things like the scientific method and skepticism, I really just advise you not turn those off when it can be easy, especially when you lose yourself in a really fun time, and you become more prime to being taught ways to get to truth, that faith has yet to be shown to really be good for anything. I mean, everybody can believe anything on faith. So, yes, on the side of wanting to hold on to that belief, definitely with how to talk to your family, what Shannon said, but also on the side of wanting to make sure your belief doesn't venture into the realm of when things become harmful. I would advise extreme caution when you are in those groups. If there are people advocating for different levels of belief, make sure that whatever they're advocating for has good justification, and preferably the word faith is nowhere near it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been most cautious about going into Wicca is I do have one parent that is a recently converted Christian in the community surrounding my church. Well, the church that I am often forced to go to is not good. I haven't had good experiences. And so I see the two sides where it can be negative, but it can also be positive. That's why I'm making sure to be cautious and not do anything stupid.
Yeah. And I think to the original thing you called in for, I disagree with the original premise that it's not religion that causes harm, it's the people. I agree that the people cause harm too, but I do think when you're talking about an actual religion, what that basic need is, I think it so easily branches off into harm that you'd be hard pressed to find an actual religion that doesn't cause harm.
You can't wield a weapon that doesn't exist. If the religion wasn't able to be weaponized, then it wouldn't be a weapon.
Yeah, but on the other side of that too, we have to remember that religion has people and that they can have undergone that. This is why I've been trying to advocate for so much lately, and I'm probably just bringing this up because I like bringing it up. We have got to stop being so shitty to people we disagree with. And it's one of the, and I'm not saying you do that. I'm not saying even anybody here, maybe nobody even watching is the kind of person I'm talking about, but within those religions that cause harm, there seems to be a total disregard growing, especially on these online spaces where you have people interacting with people and completely forgetting to consider the background or even just the fact that there is another human on the other side of it. This happened to me this week where Kwaku and I, we got into this big old fight. We were mad at each other, so mad. And then I was like, dude, why are we doing this over text? Let's face to face this. And so we got on a video call and we saw each other and it almost immediately diffused and was like, right, we're talking to a person. So we have to remember the people aspect as well. And that you have these, this is why I find religion harmful, because you have good people who do bad things in the name of that religion. I quite like Kwaku. I really do. I forgot I liked him earlier this week, and then I remembered. Earlier, as far as last year went, I can tell you, I can think of two very clear examples of humans that I am ideologically mostly aligned with, who treated me like the biggest piece of garbage on the planet for minor disagreements. And I compare that to some of the relationships with people I have with whom I have major disagreements, who, for example, don't think I should have the right to marry the people I might want to marry, and how much more like a human those people treated me with that major disagreement. So I'm just going to get on my soapbox once again and advocate for don't be a douche. And even if you're in the right, even if you have the correct beliefs, even if you are ethically superior to everybody else in the world, that does not give you now permission to be a douche. Get off the horse you rode in, come down from your ivory tower, because at the end of the day, you're probably not so fucking great. And now, at the very end of the show, I'm going to use a word that will get the whole show demonetized. What was I thinking? Anyway, so thanks for letting me go on that little bit of a rant there. Yes, thank you very much, Arden. Last thoughts before you go?
What you were saying is, like, some people at my church, they think they're so great, but then they start commenting on like LGBTQ issues and just tearing other people down, which is completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
And I'm in the closet to people at my church. I'm non-binary, so I don't tell anyone anything, and it just hurts me. And it's like they forget that other people are human too.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
And to those people, definitely don't put yourself in harm's way. Remember to love them, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it'll piss them off more. That's my love. That's my philosophy behind loving your enemies, because it'll really piss them off.
Oh my God. Mine is be better, not the same. Be better, not the same. Personal integrity. No, I will sell no one my personal integrity for immediate satisfaction.
And I will do things out of spite.
But Jimmy will.
I will. I will love the hell out of you just to piss you off.
To make you angry.
Thank you so much for calling in, Arden.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
Bye.
Oh, we're gonna have to double our therapy session after this, Jimmy. I'm just twice as long as usual.
I loved that call. I thought that was excellent.
Great. That was wonderful.
There are times, so it's kind of something. It's mostly a joke. Love your enemies because it'll piss them off. I think though that it actually got me to genuinely start to love I think I used to do. I think that kind of was the way. I think. I enjoyed antagonizing people, but then when I actually was interacting with people as though, even if it wasn't the case, it started making me appreciate and love people more. Because usually when you actually do use that, sure, sometimes it's just going to antagonize, but they're also going to remember harder you're a human, and suddenly the two of you are just being extreme, perhaps more charitable than you need to be. And so, I advocate for the authenticity of that belief, but faking it until you make it might be beneficial, as it was for me, because I used to be firebrand, angry, everyone's wrong, feelings never matter, that kind of stuff, and I faked it till I made it. But every now and then it's still fun when you can just tell they just hate how much of a cooler head and kinder approach you have. That still can be fun. But
no, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. It might be a character flaw of mine, but
No, I don't. No, it's also a relatively good strategy too. Like I recently talked to Darth Dawkins, for example, who I could tell, like in that conversation, was attempting to escalate me. Yeah, that's what he wanted. He was looking for that as an outcome. So that you make sure that you shut that down. If somebody's attempting to escalate you, escalating is just giving them the outcome that they desire. So it's strategically, when it comes to engagements, especially in the public forum, sometimes there's a necessity for that.
Agreed. And then and sometimes you just have to drop it and go, Bish, this is my house. We're doing this on my terms. Who do you think you're talking to?
What did you just say to me?
I love saying
finger. I can't even do it. I'm not sassy enough. Come off good.
I love saying bish instead of bitch too, because growing up in the Mormon church we had bishops, and so we would casually say bish. No thanks, bish. Bye, bish. Anyway, speaking of bye, bish, I'm going to give Shannon the last words here after reminding you that next Sunday, Nate Brody will be here to discuss whether or not the U.S. is a Christian nation. So that is going to be a show that I don't think any of you want to miss. Make sure, if you haven't already, that you hit the subscribe button, because not only do we do these longer live shows for those people who can't do the whole hour and 45 minutes like us, we can't do it, and yet here we are. We release the individual clips throughout the week, so you'll be able to see some of those also. Shannon, remind the people where to find you and stuff.
I'm Shannon Q. I have a YouTube channel called Shannon Q. I talk about the intersection of psychology and faith, and I also engage in complex conversations with people of all faiths and none at all. I seek out conversations specifically with people who are kind of diametrically opposed to my individual positions, so that you can have an example of better conversations and maybe, work towards a bit more understanding and a bit less combativeness. So if you'd like to check out my channel, please feel free. It's just called Shannon Q. And one of my taglines is help elevate the discourse. So I hope I can help encourage that here. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys more often, because I think I'm going to be around at least every couple of weeks, and hopefully somebody go find some theists to challenge Paulogia. I'm really excited for hosting that one. That guy knows his Bible inside out and backwards. He was a Bible quizzing coach and a youth pastor, and I want somebody to call in and challenge him on theology. And also apparently incredibly intimidating because nobody wanted to argue with me today. It's a little sad. Maybe next time people want to fight with me. It's a formidable opponent and everyone's afraid. That's got to be it.
That show with Shannon and Pelagia will be March 1st. I might have said March 3rd earlier, so just a reminder, March 1st. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for calling. You've just crossed. I'm trying to come up with, like, in the final moment. Let me just come up with a, you've just crossed the line. And then if I was better at this, I would have transitioned to the outro right then, but I'm not. So
you would have, but you're not very good.
Oh, good. The outro just doesn't work. Cool.